Well, today's webinar is a wrap up of the videos that we have released this year, the short videos on social media. So we wanted to focus our content on water pollution and what water pollution is, what we can do to reduce our impacts, and we have the 4 stars of those videos with us today. You might want to, send them an email if you want an autograph sent back to you. I don't know, by these stars, these mega stars. But they are with us today. You get to meet them today. Our lineup, our menu for today. We're going to talk with Zack, talk about the common pollutants in our water. Abigail Garofalo will follow that up with indoor water pollution. Eliana Brown's going to talk to us about outdoor water pollution. And then Peggy Anesi is going to wrap us all up with cleaning up our waters. So, with that, I think I'll go ahead and get started, and I'm going to cast it over to Miss Sarah Zack to start us off here.
Great. Thank you, Amy.
Mhm.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Zack, and I'm the Great Lakes Contaminant Specialist for University of Illinois Extension and Illinois Indiana Sea Grant. And I'm going to kind of set the stage for today and talk a bit about water pollution and what it is, before kind of turning things over to Abigail and Eliana and Peggy to give you some more specific information about how we can help combat some of these pollutants. Next slide. So, what is water pollution? It's really has a very simple definition. Water pollution is a harmful substance that contaminates a body of water, a river, a stream, a lake, a pond. And these chemicals or these harmful substances can be anything from chemicals to trash and garbage to bacteria, to nutrients. And water pollution affects a wide variety of things. It affects our drinking water. It affects the water we use in our homes for showering, for bathing, for washing our clothes, for watering our gardens. And it affects the water that we use for recreation. Some of these pollutants may be within our control to prevent, but others are at a more sort of industrial scale and require regulation to combat. Next slide. So there's really two different categories of pollutants, two different types of water pollutants. The first is called a point source pollutant. This is a pollutant that comes from a very specific source, a factory, a treatment plant. And these are the things that we consider to be easier to manage because we know where the source is and we can take concrete steps to address it. In addition, a lot of point source pollutants are regulated by laws and by organizations like Environmental Protection Agency and things like that. So oftentimes these are much simpler to handle. And this is a picture. I found this picture. It's from an old issue of Life magazine from 1968. And this is actually an aerial photograph of the Indiana Harbor. So this is the East Chicago River going into Lake Michigan. And you can see they refer to it as an oily cauldron, right? So you can see because of all the steel mills and the refineries, you can just see this pollution just making its way. And thankfully, we don't see things like this here anymore. Next slide. The second type of pollution is a non-point source, and these are a little bit trickier sources to combat. They aren't as specific. Runoff from farms and streets and our lawns, agricultural runoff, urban runoff, these tend to be very diffuse sources of pollution, and as a result, they're very difficult to manage because they're essentially the things that are on the ground that may get washed by the rain. And a lot of times these happen on accident as well. So there aren't really laws to prevent this kind of pollution. There's a wide variety of types of non-point source pollution. And in general, all of these really degrade our water quality, right? but the different pollution can have different impacts. Different types of pollution can cause different types of problems. And so, what I want to do is talk about just a couple different types of specific pollutants and kind of hopefully set the stage for our future speakers to talk about how you can handle some of these things. So, next slide. So first, lawn care chemicals and ice melt. So this category, I kind of lump these things together because these are things that you're putting on your lawn, at your home, things that you're using outside at your home. And we would consider this part of urban runoff because as it rains, these things get washed down storm drains, sorry. And I guess we would also consider things like parking lots and streets, construction sites would kind of fall into this too, particularly where ice melt is concerned, right? We're putting a lot of ice melt and rock salt and road salt on parking lots and streets and things like that. And that ends up in our water. And ice melt in particular, salt is a very strong pollutant. Just a very little bit of salt can contaminate a really big amount of water. So it's really important that we use these things carefully so that they don't end up in water. Next is unwanted medicines. So these are the medicines that you have in your home that are either expired or you don't need anymore, and they're just sort of left over. And we used to advise people to flush these down the drain, and we don't do that anymore. We absolutely do not do that anymore because we know better. The medicine in our water does not get removed from by wastewater treatment plants. And so when that water is returned back to the environment, oftentimes the medicine that's in the water also returned. And this medication impacts on people. It can cause reproductive and developmental impairments in fish and frogs. It can cause impacts to animals that consume things in the water, things that consume aquatic insects, things that eat fish like birds and raccoons and things like that are a great example because a lot of these things make their way up the food chain. Different medications can cause different changes in behavior. If you think about the changes that something like an antidepressant has in people, often something similar in an aquatic organism as well. Maybe it has to do with the urgency to avoid prey or urgency to feed or something like that. But you can definitely see those impacts. And then lastly, one of the things that we worry about as well is antibiotic resistance. And so when you get antibiotics out into the environment, oftentimes, the incomplete um, dosage that we take and the environmental contamination from antibiotics can cause bacteria to be resistant to those antibiotics and then cause health problems because of that. Next slide. Okay, and then the last two I want to talk about is plastic pollution, and I'll just touch briefly on agricultural runoff as well. So plastic pollution, in particular, I want to mention microplastics. So that's what's in this picture here. Microplastics are pieces of plastic that are 5 millimeters or less, and they come from a variety of sources. So here you can see there are four different types of microplastics. Fragments, which are little pieces that have broken off of larger plastics. So like when a water bottle breaks down into pieces, that forms fragments. Foam is the breakdown of things like styrofoam coolers. Fibers come from our textiles, our laundry. And then pellets are little beads of plastic, essentially, that can get released to the environment accidentally as little beads of plastic. They're used to mold other plastics. So the impact from microplastics has been something that's been studied pretty widely, and particularly recently has been very newsworthy. We know that plastics get eaten by different organisms, and that can have a variety of different impacts. So when a fish eats plastic pieces, a couple different things can happen. One, it can fill up space in an animal's stomach so that an animal thinks that it's full, but it's not actually eating anything that has any nutritive value. So it can starve animals essentially by taking up that space and slow growth because of that. And then it has sort of, trickle down effects where this impact then causes changes to reproduction and then broader changes to whole food webs in rivers and lakes and streams. And research has really been trying to document sort of the extent of microplastic pollution, um, not just in the environment, but also in us. And unfortunately, microplastics are all in our bodies. They're finding microplastics everywhere in our bodies, in our lungs because we're inhaling these fibers, in our guts because we're eating them on accident, because they're in our drinking water, in a lot of our sources of food. They're really, really widespread. And we're still learning a lot about the impacts of those are going to be. So the fact is that I guess for Lake Michigan in particular, about 80% of the trash that's found in Lake Michigan is plastic. And that amounts to about 22 million pounds of plastic per year. So if you kind of think about all of that plastic breaking down into these small pieces, it's a lot of small pieces of plastic. So this is a type of pollution that still needs a lot of research to understand. And then lastly, agricultural runoff. I just want to mention this is very similar, well, not very similar, but it's somewhat similar to putting lawn care chemicals, pesticides, fertilizers on your lawn, except at a much, much larger scale. Agricultural runoff can be considered either point source or non-point source pollution, depending, right? If we're just talking about like this, for example, this is a picture of a livestock farm, and you can see in the distance cows that are just kind of walking through the stream. And when it rains on this farm, all the water makes its way to this little agro stream and it gets carried. This is a tributary of the Kankakee River. And it gets carried into the Kankakee River. So all that animal waste, right? Those nutrients from the animal waste are ending up in the water. So that would be considered a non-point source from agriculture. But when we have things that are like CAFOs, right? Confined animal feeding operations, large scale farms that are producing milk, producing eggs, like that, those would be considered point sources because they often have a concentrated point where they're discharging their pollution into the water. So agricultural runoff is both regulated and not regulated and sort of can be both. And the fun thing about this picture is that my husband gets to walk through it and sample it for aquatic insects this summer, and he's really excited to interact with the cows. Um, so, so that was all I have for you, and I want to turn it over to Abigail to talk about some of these indoor sources of pollution and what we can do to help with them.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. We can go to my intro slide. So when I say Sarah kind of gave us a really good intro of like the methods of like the pollution pathway is what we kind of talk about. Like how does it get into our water, pollute the environment in some way. And so I'm gonna like kind of go more specifically into like what that looks like, but just to make sure we're all on the same page about it. And then I will kind of hopefully give you some things that you can do about these pollutants to address them. And when I say indoor water pollution, I'm really just kind of talking about like products that we use inside our home because they're making their way outside of the home. So yeah, we'll start with medication. That's our next slide. So there's two main pathways that it's really getting into our water or our environment. It's naturally excreted or rinsed off or improper disposal, like what Sarah was talking about. Now there's not much we can do about like natural excretions, right? But the improper disposal is, as Sarah was saying, 100% preventable. So we're either throwing them in the trash or we're putting them in the toilet or the sink. So you may think, oh, great, like Proper disposal, that means I just don't put them down the sinks. I listen to Sarah. I remember her voice is in my head. I should not throw things down the sink, right? But the trash also causes problems, right? So when we put them in a landfill, these things are going to break down. They mix with water. The liquid that comes off of landfills is called leachate. And typically there's like a pipe from the landfill that takes it out into like a water treatment plant. If it's not leaching into the surrounding soil or body of water. A properly formed landfill will not leak in that way, but it happens, right? And so we're pumping it still into a water treatment plant. So it's still going to make it into a water treatment plant in some way, shape, or form. And as Sarah explained, it's going to our local streams and rivers in that way if the water treatment plant can't remove it. If for some reason it is like that pharmaceutical is removed in some way, shape, or form, it's probably going into the biosolid produced at that land or at that water treatment plant. And a lot of those biosolids are actually used as fertilizers for agricultural lands, which again is making our way into our local waterways. So what can we do about this? What's the answer here? Next slide to unveil the answer. Take back programs, right? So there is proper medication disposal programs all across the state of Illinois. This map I pulled directly from unwantedmeds.org. I love this website. They just redid it. I'm sure Sarah had a hand in it. And it has like an FAQ on like, what do I do about my like information that's printed on the bottle? What about lotions, like other personal care products, things like that? It answers all of those questions. And it also has this really great map. Now you may be looking at this map and saying, excuse me, there's giant holes on this map in which my town is not represented. Look, Amy over here is like, yeah, my town right there. I want to point out that I also looked up my local town, which is in the Chicago suburbs. And I was like, I know that my local municipality takes medication back because I just did it the other day. And so if you're not on this map, one, there's usually like seasonal take back programs that are occurring. And two, your local public works, local law enforcement, or even pharmacy may be taking back these medications on a more regular basis. So all you have to do is just like, oh yeah, CVS has a drop box, things like that. These local pharmacies or these like more chain pharmacies are having programs. They also don't want to be responsible for these things making it in the water. And so definitely using those resources to kind of check out and see what you can do. I personally do like a little spring cleanup every year in which I go through and say, yep, that Tylenol is expired by 4 years. It's time to go. So can't make it past that 4-year mark for some reason. So things like that, just do a little spring cleanup, make it part of your cleanup, your medicine cabinet cleanup, put it away in the proper disposal method. All right, let's talk about microplastics a little bit. I didn't touch on this in my video, but I wanted to make sure I touched on it now because Sarah does talk about it. So Sarah gave a really great introduction to like, what are microplastics, right? We're not talking about like plastic bags in the water. We're talking about like the shedding of plastic materials in different forms. These are often coming from like plastic storage, right? Water bottles, bags, containers, and they're shedding off when you like rinse them in the water. Our clothes, anything that's like polyester, nylon, acrylic, rayon, spandex, all of those are synthetic fibers that when we wash them could be shedding plastic product or plastic microplastics. And then just like general plastic products, the one that I think of that comes to mind is like those triangle shaped tea bags are usually made of plastic, baby bottles, the plastic ones, right? Those are all kind of like shedding these microplastic products. And they're coming off in lots of different ways, right? Whether we wash them, either way, whether excreting them, washing them in the sink or the dishwasher or in a washing machine, they're making their way to our local water treatment plant. If it's possible to remove them, they're getting removed, most likely not, making their way into our local waterways in many different formats. So what can we do about it, right? So one, we can avoid serving bottled water. I like to just kind of put that one on everyone's plate first and foremost, because the solution is to like use a reusable water container. There's so much less microplastics in our in water from the sink or like a faucet or a filter than there is from like a bottled water. If it's accessible to you, right? Like we all know that sometimes our water isn't accessible from the tap to consume. So go with all of these come with like what works and what is accessible to you because some of these solutions can be expensive, right? Storing in glass containers. If you have the option and you're doing a refresh of your containers, right? Switching over to non-plastic ones. A lot of like children's products are plastic. So if we look at like the plates that we're using, I personally am not using plastic or glass plates for my kids, right? But aluminum is a great alternative. Another option is considering fabrics when you're purchasing clothing, right? Going for those like cotton and wool fibers. Again, though, it's hard to replace like your workout gear, right? With cotton and wool. So thinking about what's plausible. And I we have this from our Sarah's done a few like microplastic webinars for us. And so I know that like when cleaning, like fleeces are often like a big shedder of microfibers, microplastic fibers. So we want to make sure that we're spot cleaning or like minimizing. If you do have like a situation where your fleece is being used frequently and needs to be washed often, maybe consider investing in like a washing machine filter or the washing bags. All right. So the last one, Sarah didn't super touch on, but I don't want to forget it because we all have things like this in our home that we're like, what are we going to do with these? Drain cleaners, um, paint thinners, any kind of like batteries, car maintenance items. The one that was most surprising to me that was considered hazardous waste was alcohol-based hand sanitizer. If it's greater than 60% alcohol, it is, according to the Illinois EPA, a hazardous waste material. And that is because it can start fires in the landfill. And I'm like, you know what? Can't think of a better reason. I think that's a great reason that we shouldn't be putting alcohol-based hand sanitizer in the trash. But all of these kinds of chemicals, there's a great list on the Illinois EPA website. And then there's also like just looking at your local, if they're doing a hazardous waste drop off, like what do they accept? All of those things like should not be put in the trash. And again, similar pathway, right? Like we put them in the trash. Maybe they make their way. They could start a fire, right? So it's unsafe for our sanitary workers and people in this field. And B, the leachate could also be causing problems and has to be treated anyways. So putting these in a properly hazardous waste facility is going to be really important. So what do we do about that, right? So first, before we are like, great, let's just make sure it goes in the right trash space, right? Let's consider our alternatives, right? So when we think about drain cleaners, like maybe something like a snake is a better option to consider first when it comes to these kinds of things. And then what I like to call pantry options for a lot of these cleaning materials, usually like vinegars, baking sodas, lemon juice, things like that that you kind of see that are like that serve similar functions to what the product you would have it buy. You would have bought anyways. A, it's going to be cheaper on your wallet. B, it's going to reduce plastic, right? Because you're not buying those products just for that purpose. And C, now you don't have to find a hazardous waste facility every time you need to buy a new product. And then we just can't avoid some things, right? You're doing a new paint of your house, you're refreshing the paint, or you bought a new house, you got to paint it, things like that. You got to properly dispose of that like oil-based or latex paint. And so they have these really great community hazardous waste collection days. And they usually like want to advertise them greatly. Most waste facility, like municipal facilities, won't just generally collect hazardous waste like all the time. They try to do like big pushes of like, here's the hazardous waste collection week or something. But make sure you're looking at those and finding out from your local community, or like maybe there's like an EPA push in the spring usually for when they can collect these things. That would be your best option for properly disposing of these materials. And with that, I will pass it off to outdoor water pollution with Eliana.
Thanks so much, Abigail. So yes, we have now come outdoors, and what you see pictured here in the circle is a creek that is badly eroded and has the pollution you see in litter. So this is what we don't want to do, and I'm going to give you some ways so that we can all pitch in and work together so that our creeks don't have to look like this. You can go to the next slide. But first, we have to talk about the story of stormwater and why this storm drain is important. Stormwater is rainwater and snowmelt that comes off our hard surfaces that goes into the storm drain. Now, our storm drains really are our friends. They keep our streets dry when it rains, and we want to have that. But we need to keep in mind where those storm drains lead to. That water that goes into the storm drain goes through the storm sewer and comes out the other end to our receiving streams and lakes. So I'm going to give you these three reasons, or excuse me, three ways that we can do right by our stormwater. And by doing right by our stormwater, we do right by our lakes and rivers. So the first way is that we're going to reduce the pollution before it ever even gets into the storm drain. We're kind of building off of what Sarah was sharing with us. We come and we look at our household here. In addition to lawn chemicals and ice melt, we always want to make sure that, say, we want to be curbing and picking up any of our dog waste. The guy here that's mowing the lawn, we want to make sure that where the grass comes out, that the grass does not go into the street. So of course, as soon as it rains, it's going to go right into the storm drain. A couple of other things I want to point out on this graphic is the garage. You see neatly tucked into the garage, there's chemicals that are being stored in there. Those can leak out. Anything that gets onto the land can get into the water. That garage is also going to have a car in there, so we always want to make sure to keep our car tuned up, because any of those little leaks of oil and automotive fluid, those can end up if they're on that concrete drive, that with a rainstorm comes, again, it can get into the storm drain. Anything that's on the land can get washed into the storm drain going to our lakes and rivers. So what if there was a way that we could maybe put something in between what we have going on in the land? We're cleaning everything up, we're minimizing it as much as possible. You go to the next slide, we have what's called an intervention. This intervention happens to be a rain garden. So we're taking the end of that downspout, instead of letting it go and reach the storm drain, the water is being allowed to soak into the ground. And that's how it would have done before the house, before the driveway, before the street. Water falling on the land would have just soaked into the ground. And by doing something like a rain garden, you are allowing the natural water cycle to be what we have going on. It restores that natural water cycle. There's a lot of benefits that happen when you do something like this. We are reducing that opportunity for the pollution that's on the land to get washed into the drain. We're also allowing for more capacity in that storm sewer itself. So the water that would be going into the storm sewer, it won't have as much opportunity to back up. There won't be so much of it. And that's going to help reduce the flooding from our streets or from basement backups. There's also a nice benefit to the receiving stream itself, because all that stormwater that would be rushing into the creek won't happen. And that helps to prevent erosion. So those eroded banks that we saw in that first photo, that we will have less of that. Lastly, by having the stormwater be captured in something like this rain garden here and soak into the soil. We're replenishing and recharging our groundwater, which again is really important for returning the water cycle to be a more natural water cycle. So what are we doing here? We have that water that's coming off here. With a rain garden, you are removing some of the soil, so that water is actually kind of captured in there. It slows it down, and then it soaks into the ground. Another thing that you can do on a homeowner level that a lot of people use is a rain barrel. The water, of course, won't soak into the ground directly until, say, maybe you're using it to water your lawn, something like that. Soaking into the ground or utilizing in other ways is gonna go a long way so we can reap these benefits of wise water use. Okay. So last thing before we go on to the next slide, I just want to put a little plug in here of saying that with a rain garden, you also have and a pollinator garden, you have an opportunity for using native plants. And native plants tend to have extensive root systems, which will make it more, makes the soil better at soaking up all that rainwater. So we always want to put a plug in for our native plants. You can go to the next slide, and number 3 will be revealed. Is finding your watershed. So on this photo or on the slide here, you see the major watersheds in Illinois. If you're in Illinois, no matter where you are, but if you are living in Illinois, you are living in one of these watersheds. It's important to kind of know where your watershed is. I like to think that it helps you to feel a little bit more of a kinship to your waterway itself. A watershed is area of land that drains to that water body, be it a lake, a stream, or a wetland. Most of the watersheds in Illinois make its way to the Mississippi River. There is a sliver along Lake Michigan that does go into Lake Michigan. It's a pretty important sliver, but a whole bunch of the rest of these watersheds are going to go into the Mississippi River. You can find your watershed by going to this website, mywaterway.epa.gov. And if you want to kind of experience what it would be like if you were, say, a drop of rain that is coming on to your own house, you can go to this website, this river-runner at .samlearner.com, and it will allow you to be that drop of rain. You input your address or whatever address you want to see, and you are that drop of water. It shows you as it's going into its nearest water body, and then the water body that it goes into next, and then the water body that it goes into next until it makes its pathway to the ocean. So you can see just really how connected you are, your own house. You may feel really far away from the ocean. We are far away from the ocean, but that drop of water will end up and make its way, unless it is captured and is allowed to become groundwater. So that's a fun thing to do. I find it fun. I think it would be also a fun activity to do with kids. And go to the next slide. You are super passionate about stormwater like I am, and you cannot get enough of it. You want to learn more. I want to encourage you to go to Extension's website. The quick link for that is go.illinois.edu/stormwater-management. Can also visit the Red Oak Rain Garden. The website for it is redoakraingarden.org. This is a demonstration rain garden on the University of Illinois campus that I manage along with a small but mighty team. And on our website, We have put together some nice blogs that talk about stormwater and rain gardens. There are some example native plant and rain garden plans that you can try it out into your own landscape. Also want to put a plug if you want to in this website you can find our newsletter, which just went out yesterday, but you can get on the newsletter list so that you can get all of our news. Lastly, I really do want to encourage you to use native plants. We happen to be 2 days away from one of the most incredible native plant sales that I've ever seen. The Illinois Native Plant Society sale is in Springfield on May 10th. If you're not near Springfield or you got something else going on Saturday, you can see their website. That's listed here, the illinoisnativeplants.org/native/plant/sales, so that you could find a sale that's closer to your area. Also on their website, if you're not able to make a sale, there is a nice list of native plant nurseries that you can check out. This will help go a long way to not only make our waterways better, but to beautify your own landscapes. And with that, I'm going to toss it over to Peggy.
Thanks, Eliana, and thank you all for sticking with us. I'm looking at the numbers, and those of you who registered and are here, I appreciate you very much. Lots of voices today. This will be your closing voice, talking about cleaning up our waters, and if something to think about. We've done a lot of attempts at doing things well, and it turns out there's things we could do better, and that's what we need to keep doing. We need to keep answering to the fix. If it's not perfect, be open to fixing it. I made some notes for the end. So if we could move on next, I want to show you a few of my slides. So this is just an example, something to think about. 70% of our waterways, as you can read, comes from a combination of stormwater and water treatment discharge. That means that only 30% is coming up from groundwater or sustaining that during drought times from groundwater. So the correlation I want you to think about is all this water is intermingling. We are in a water cycle endlessly. I have a dot where I'm sitting today, where I just love watching weather maps. I'm fascinated by weather, and when it's coming back around, I just want to know it's coming back around. And we've had a number of storms. We do say that, we've had these huge storms. It's just it's not that they're all huge. To be honest, if you look at it and you study rainwater, it's that we don't have those long drip drop days into the next day like we used to have. We just get it a little shorter amount of time, right? The picture on the right is my adult son during the pandemic, and that's my that's the field right behind my house. The right side is an alfalfa field. The waterfall, we gave it a name I don't remember, goes right into a row crop field, and you can see the subdivision, the nice fancy one there to the north. This is your stormwater. This is eventually could either go to the Mississippi or soak into the ground and become part of your drinking water. So what we want to remember is, we can't, in the big picture, we can make changes, but environmentally control this rain coming across there, no. But what is on the landscape is up to us. I've seen a picnic table go across this field before. That was a very point source, by the way, Sarah, point source. There goes a picnic table. But what we're putting on our lawns and what we're throwing or putting on the, pouring out oil or something on the ground, that matters. And we can make a change in how we take care of that landscape. So when we see this, we have a little more faith that it's just nature doing its usual, cleaning up of things, and that when it calms down, there won't be quite so much contamination in it. Okay, next. So here's the thing, we all need a place to live. And we get frustrated sometimes, those of us who have been around for a while. I'm getting to that age where I go, oh, Russa, but hey, everybody, our human population is growing. Actually putting things together in a tighter space isn't all bad for the overall landscape, but every one of those homes is going to have water. It's going to require water. and it's going to be disposing of water. And like many of our speakers have talked about, things that are going down the drain, things that are there on your landscape, all these people deserve a space, all of us, to live out our dreams, but we have to continue to be resilient and be able to be here and have that water quality at our, at our beck and call. We don't think about it. We turn on a faucet, and I'm just as guilty. We don't think about it. I've had guests from Southeast Asia, and they are appalled that we use a toilet with potable water for our waste. They don't understand. And it's a perspective that we don't think about because we've been blessed with the intelligence and the engineering to have wastewater treatment and to be able to get rid of any material. The problem is when we created wastewater treatment for disease control, we didn't mean for them to become our trash cans. So like Abigail was talking about, it seems like the right thing to do because you're protecting your family from incidentally taking something that might make them now sick that was supposed to make them better. And in the end, it's going into wastewater treatment. And as Sarah said, potentially not getting out. We do have a need for the next level of those kinds of things. The thing to remember too, without water, we don't have communities. So water quality is going to become an issue with growth. We need to know how to protect that water because the quantity will be pursed out farther. So we all want to be here. We all have to protect, and we need to know where we're building. We need to know where we're putting our communities. We have a tendency to assume that water's everywhere. And quite frankly, we're finding it's not. And that some places don't have the water that ordinances say they should have. In other words, you can build homes in your county based on an ordinance. The ordinance doesn't take into account how much water is there to draw up for those homes. Next slide. So what if, think about it. What if everybody really did flush all at the same time, you guys? This is serious. What if all the water that we're putting down with our increased growth, it puts pressure on our treatment plants? We think treatment plants are disgusting, but they're saving our lives, right? People are like, oh, I don't want to go see the water treatment plant. That's gross. Okay, well, that's all of us creating that situation. So we have to support water treatment facilities. We here, not here where I'm sitting, but where I live, we call it our water reclamation facility. And we're trying to change that name so that people understand that's an important space and we need to support them. So more people, more tax dollars, better treatment, potentially better water being let go back into our streams. Wastewater treatment can only do and clean water to the best of its ability before it gets an influx above and beyond what its capacity is. So if your community outgrows the capacity, we have to think about that and reverse that. We have to increase the capacity when it doesn't seem we need it in order to take on growth. So when there's times of growth, we looked back at 2008 and we started scrambling where I live, trying to help municipalities rewrite ordinances so that when companies came in to build, they had better guidelines as to how much they could build based on capacity in their communities for water treatment, sewer lines, and incoming water. So wastewater, as you can see, is everybody. It's not just us in homes. It's commercial. It's industrial, big industrial. Industry may use water to cool. Think about all of our computer world that we all count on. We're sitting on it right now. The cooling effect, where I live, we just had a huge center built. I can't remember how many acres under roof, and it's a cooling center, right? It's a meta plant. We have to consider, is that being recycled? Is it being sent right into our rivers and streams? So these sanitary, it's also called sanitary sewage, kind of an oxymoron to me. But as you see there, you can see the sludge, that it needs better names. I agree. We need to come up with better names for this so people appreciate it. So you can see it, and it goes through stages. It is a science in its chemistry, but it's also using nature as an example by using good bacteria and keeping those bacteria happy so that they can consume and take care of all of the things we put down the drain. What do we have next? Let's see what the next slide gives us. So Ooh, I love this one. So what is, you should have this now just from my excitement, right? What is the most important facility in your community? Wait, it's not the library. It's not the police station, not the fire station. It's not even a grocery store, right? Oh, Amy, what is it? Ugh, anticipation. Ah, ooh, what is that? Those are huge discs. Actually, it's an aerial view of a local water treatment plant. Those treatment plants are slowly stirring, adding oxygen because bacteria can't work if it can't breathe. So the sludge, everybody on here should help us come up with new names, right? Nothing. We can't have anybody living and existing in a space where there's no water quantity or quality water that it can't be changed. If you put something into a public well, you cannot take it out. It's like having a glass of water and pouring in, Kool-Aid or Crystal Light. You can't take that back out, and it's no different than when we have it in our water coming through. What's our next one? Let's see. It's always a guesstimate, right? Oh, there we go. We're going to keep this up. So I think it's clear we can't be selfish about water quality. We can't just keep going, oh, that's nice, but I don't want to make the time to take my medicine in. I'm guilty of going, you know what? I just want to scrub the toilet with something a little bigger than vinegar today and get that clean. It's hard for us to change. We've been handed all these convenient things. But we have generations to come. I'm counting on these kids that went to my summer camp. We studied the Kishwaukee River. It's a Class A stream. Nobody loves their river in their hometown and thinks, it's the worst place ever. We have a Class A stream. I know it because these children test the water for living organisms and for dissolved oxygen, etc. Right? Thank you, Maddie Kraft. I see that. I love the Kishwaukee River too. So a couple of things to finish this off with. I'm checking our time, right? So here's what came to mind as all of us were, all of my friends were speaking before me. Fix. We wanted more food. We needed more food to feed the world. So what did we do? We expanded our machinery to go to the edges, and we lost our field edges, our fence rows. Those were areas that not only for wildlife, but it helped clean water before anything came off the fields. And let me point out that our farmers are doing everything they can. They don't want their money going down the drain. But we had a demand for food that required us to farm further and closer to the edges. Sanitation, we talked about that. Sanitation keeps us from getting disease. My son walked out of a desktop computer in our office at home when he was 9 years old, madder than a hornet. I said, what is wrong? He was playing Civilization. He said, I just killed my entire community I've been working on for days. And I said, well, how did you do that? He goes, I forgot sanitation. They all got disease and died. And I said, oh, I should, you knew more than I did at that time, right? Recycled plastics. We thought it was so cool. We'd figured out how to take plastics and make fleeces and clothes. And it turns out that fix isn't working so well. So it doesn't mean we have to be settled and go, we tried and keep going, right? It means that we need to make a difference and see if we can somehow switch that up. Like Abigail said, put a mesh, a catch that'll catch those. They're pretty tiny. So that's going to take some work to figure out how that's going to catch those tiny biosolids. Yeah, I saw it being spread on a field. Yes, we've got biosolids. We're using it as fertilizer. It's safe. And now there's medications in it. Now those medications are on the landscape. We don't know for sure how they're going to affect food, or are they just going to go off in our stormwater and start over again, right through the cycle. Drain cleaners. I loved it. They're under hazardous waste, but we use them in our water. I guess we have to come up with tricks. I pour actually hot kettle of tea water and just use my tea kettle. And about once every few weeks, I pour steaming hot water down my drains because of toothpaste and soap and that kind of stuff. So in the end, you guys, we're all doing what we can and what we've been given. In a sense, containers to hold our food. And now, if you can, we need to go to glass. It's just about continuing to make an effort. Will your rain garden on your property save the planet? No, but it's going to keep your rainwater on your property, and it's going to protect the groundwater. And you're going to do something that if we would have multitudes do it, we could actually make a dent in some of this and continue to have water available to us. So I hope you all will consider just one thing that you heard today. And next time you drive by the river, just remember you might be drinking it one day, and you might want to think about what's going down that drain. And that's all I have.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peggy and Abigail, Sarah, Eliana. We really appreciate you. We do have a question in here. I wanted to pitch it so everyone could hear it, but Linda asks, as a volunteer around waterways, are there specific things we can test the ponds and or rivers to determine how healthy these bodies of water are? They do some surveying of amphibians that depend on these water sources, and they want to keep those water bodies clean. So, any of the speakers here today want to key in on that? I know Eliana shared a resource in the chat.
I was going to add, we interviewed somebody from Riverwatch for one of our early podcasts, and I would recommend getting involved in that program. They use macroinvertebrate monitoring as a main quality indicator, which is a great way that honestly I think is really accessible for like schools as well to kind of like participate in the assessment of water quality. And it's also just like a great way to know more about your waterway, and you kind of get to adopt a stream in that instance. Like you get assigned a site with Riverwatch. And so you get to be like, this is my stream that I monitor, and you get to see it over time, and you can visit